Well, in the Second World War, the Canadian Battalion dropped into Normandy on D-Day.
Because of the diversity of the type of men in our battalion, we were the first, and we were selected to be the lead the division in.
We went in as a leading element of a major force going in on D-Day.
The role of the battalion was to isolate the battlefield on the left flank. All the troops going in on the beaches had an airborne presence on both flanks.
In actual fact, the division had to do two separate drops. The 3rd and 5th Brigade went in together with the available aircraft. The aircraft returned to England and had to come back.
They said there wasn't going to be much flak going over the coast, but the plane shook. I can remember you could hardly stand up in the thing. It was shaking, but anyway, we got through this anti-aircraft fire.
The pilots that were flying the aircraft at the time most of them were very new troop-carrying crews and had difficulty in putting up with low flight into heavy flak, so that the drop was extremely wide.
And so the order came. They had an Air Force guy at the door, and he was because everybody had a lot of equipment on, and as everybody got to the door, he pushed them out as well as jumped. And so, but what happened? It took longer, I think, than they expected. And the first 18 got out, and he stopped me. I was 19, so the two of us had to sit down. And really, it was a kind of a nerve-wracking experience. We had come all this way, and I thought to myself, surely to goodness we're not going to go back to England after coming all this way. But then he went around again. He said, I think I'll make a second pass around, and the two of you can go. So we left. Now, the first 18 were either killed or captured or missing. Where they landed, I have no idea. But myself and the other person that was 20, we landed in a very quiet open field. And it was, but what happened was, of course, that the whole medical staff, except for myself, was wiped out in one fell swoop, in a sense.
Of the 120 men that went in out of bombers, only 35 men landed on the field, but they managed to carry out every objective.
Our objectives were assigned to us and were to be taken before first light when the beach landing people were to come in.
Our whole division was on the left flank to prevent the Germans from coming along the beaches towards the landing areas.
Tremendous planning went into it, but it proved, as our brigadier told us many times before operations briefings, he always said, gentlemen, on the drop zone you can anticipate chaos and confusion. And certainly Normandy proved that.
The men were scattered as far apart, which is hard to believe, but 40 miles from one stick to the extreme other. And as soon as the planes crossed the coast, the pilots, being a little nervous, started to take evasive action. And the men are standing up, fully loaded, all pressed together, ready to get out the door. And then the plane does a dodging about. The guys fall all over the place. So now they're off course, and the guys are tumbling and all tangled up. So only one at a time go out very slowly. And the advantage in paratroop is if you go out close together, tight together, then you're going to land on the ground close together and you can find each other. But if you're spread out 500 feet or more, then you have, especially in the dark, you have a very difficult time getting together and doing anything. And one of the worst things that happened is that the Germans flooded a huge area where they thought Paris might go in. And we had a lot of our fellows drop in the water. Now, where the fields were, say, 3 feet of water covered it, it's not so bad. The men managed to get up. But if they dropped in over a drainage ditch that was maybe 6, 7 feet deep, they had 80 pounds of ammunition and everything. They just went right to the bottom, so we had a few guys drowned.
And about 1 minute after midnight, we were dropped, and I ended up in water, at least my knees.
When I landed, it was at night time, and of course, it was, to be honest with you, it was very confusing.
I expected to see some objects that I would know where and where to hit for the rendezvous, and there was nothing.
And trying to find another companion, I couldn't find one. There was nobody around. I was a little nervous.
We had gone through, a week or two of briefing and looking at models and sand tables and maps of the areas, but it was, as I said, I landed in this open field, and I really didn't really know where I was.
I had no idea where I was, but there were aircraft flying overhead, and I figured that, all right, they're coming from the coast, so I headed in the direction they came from.
There was nobody else around, so I sort of wandered out of the field, and then and found a road, and then tried to find some sort of a sign that would tell me where to go.
I think I walked almost all night, dodging German patrols.
One of the most interesting things that our battalion lost an awful lot of officers on that drop. A very high percentage of officers. But it didn't seem to make all that much difference, because the NCOs, we had platoon sergeants, were excellent men, highly trained, and they just seemed to take over.
Our heavy mortar platoon was dropped behind Le Havre, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 kilometers from where our original drop zone was.
An officer, a mortar officer, and signalmen landed near Le Havre, right by a German airfield.
They were all killed or captured.
That took the heavy equipment right out of our hands, because no artillery was available to us at that particular time. So it was down to just small arms that we had to utilize.
But it is remarkable, and I've always thought that the drop, scattered as it was, and you will hear countless stories of those who you will have interviewed, that they were scattered. But the battalion was successful by nightfall in having taken all its objectives.
And it was to the credit of all those young soldiers who were able to try and get themselves reoriented, to get back to where they belonged, to get to their company rendezvous and the battalion rendezvous.
And right down to the last man, he knew where he had to go to rendezvous, and they were hell-bent to get there, and most of them did.
The success of it was largely due to the individual initiative of the soldier who was there.
It's amazing that they did so well in finding their way to the RVs.
So you had, in some cases, you had corporals and sergeants who were finally able to put together a group, quite often from different companies, and finally getting to the objectives and linking with others to complete the mission.
We had the bridges to blow, a headquarters to capture, German headquarters.
The Air Force, who had been designated to come in to bomb the Merville Battery before the airborne landing, were about 3 or 4 hours late in getting to Normandy, and dropped several 1,000-pound bombs, and consequently knocked out a great deal of C Company who were to take the town of Airville. Consequently, about 35 men were available to put in that attack when there should have been 130.
One of the worst actions of that first day was in our company. We were in the colonel or the major, an officer, and 6 other men were on the second floor of a house overlooking a German strong point. And they fired a Piat shell at it, and it fell short. So they got ready to fire another one, and the German gun turned around and sent a shell into the room, killed them all in the room. So we lost our officers and and 5 other men.